So she spends a lot of her time at the Harvard School of Public Health, and in fact, we were recommended when we were interested in setting up a session about project management by one of our alums who had been going there this year and was like, oh my gosh, you have to have Karen Curley. So as someone who is a self-identified project management geek, I'm so excited by this session, and thank you for coming, Karen.
Welcome. Thanks. All right, so as somebody not used to using a mic, can you hear me? Yeah? All right, you'll let me know if that changes at any time along the way. Okay, I like to think that I have a pretty loud voice, but you're a pretty big group, and if you in the back can't hear me. The other thing is I was warned before I came that I needed to speak slowly. I tend to go really fast, so if I'm going way too fast, somebody let me know, okay? Tell me to slow down, tell me you want me to go over something again. I'm used to teaching at hospitals, so I can talk over ambulances and fire trucks and police and all that kind of stuff, but you guys will let me know if we're heading down the right path here. So I really appreciate you guys adding project management to what you're trying to learn, because I don't know about all of you and your experiences, but I know for myself, when I finished college and went to grad school and started my experiences, people gave me work because I was smart, right? And smart for them equaled I knew how to do all these things. And I quickly found out that wasn't the case. Just because I was smart didn't mean that I knew how to do all these things. And one of those things was project management. So you guys are getting an opportunity, and while I don't claim that I'll make you experts in the next hour and a half, I'll give you enough of a taste that hopefully this will start to sink in, it'll become familiar, you'll recognize some of the terms, and then you'll use these resources as you go on, not just with your fellowship, but throughout your careers, and you'll come back to this. And if you want more, you'll study up on it a little bit more. Okay, is that fair? All right, so our objectives today are to do some of the basics and to talk to you about some of the tools that will help you in terms of navigating effective projects. I think it's okay when you come to a session and people give you some information. I think it's a lot better when you get some tools that you can actually use. And just to let you know, in terms of the use of these tools, they're all low tech. So if you have access to a computer, into a computer system where you're going to be, you're good to go. You can put it online, you can project it with an LCD, you can do all those kinds of things. If you're somewhere where you need a whiteboard and a marker or a flip chart, or you're literally drawing it on the ground, you can do it in chalk in a driveway if you need to. Okay, that's all these tools are meant to be high tech and low tech, and you make it work in the setting that you're in. Fair? All right, so let's talk a little bit about project management and how it came to be. I don't want to bore you with the history. I just want to give you a little bit of the grounding in it, because most people don't know that it was actually the birth of the space program in the United States that sent project management, excuse my pun, to the moon. Right? So it was really when people were doing project management and they didn't call it project management. They called it probably program management, or they just called it management. They didn't really put a label on it. And it wasn't until we were trying to actually get somebody onto the moon that it required that level of discipline, that it required that level of logistics, that the whole project management philosophy and process was really set aground. And then in the late 60s, there was an organization called PMI, which is the Project Management Institute, and they were formed. They're a nonprofit. They're on the web, so if you don't know their website, it's www.pmi.org. They've got all kinds of information on there. Some of you in your careers will go on and become PMI certified. You'll become a PMP, right? And you'll get all these cool letters after your name. Some of you won't. It won't be essential for the work that you're doing, but PMI is a great thing to know about, and they've got a guide called the PMBOK, right? I didn't bring it with me because it weighs about 50 pounds. Who needs to lug that around? But they've got a guide that are the global standards for project management. So no matter where you're working in the world, no matter what you're doing, there is now a standard for approaching projects, and you're going to begin to learn those standards today, okay? All right, so one of the other things that I'll just tell you quickly, which might be helpful, is how I got into this work. So I was a pre-med student that was going to be the best pediatrician to ever cross the continent. And then I did my rotations at Barnes Hospital in St. Louis, Missouri, and I realized that I absolutely hated having to practice medicine. What I really liked was how, I didn't hate it, that's probably too strong, but it didn't jazz me. What I liked was how the hospital worked and how things were put into place to take care of patients. And so that evolved my career as a social worker and a public health professional to really focus on the how and not so much the what. And so I talk a lot in my classes with students and professionals about blending the how and the what. Project management is a what, it's a science, right? There's a philosophy, there are steps and tools, but more importantly, as public health professionals, you're dealing with the how. You're dealing with the process, you're dealing with the people, you're dealing with how to fit things together, right, in a way that moves something forward. And that's what really began to jazz me in my career and why I wanted to do this kind of work. So let's just quickly define projects. There are a couple of things you need to know when you're talking about project work, different from program work, right? And you see a few words underlined. One is temporary. Something is not a project if it's in somebody's job description. And I say that, but you'd be surprised how many people think that they are doing project work, which is normal operations. Now, does that mean that you can't use some of these tools? Of course not. They apply, but for a project to really be considered a project and utilize a lot of these kinds of tools and steps, it's temporary. It has a beginning and it has an end. That end might be 3 months out, it might be 6 months out, it might be 3 years out, and there are phases of the project that you're working on. But there is a beginning and there is an end. The other thing is it ought to be unique. So a project becomes a project because it's something that somebody wants to try, right? Someone has an idea. Somebody has a thought. There's money available to do X, Y, Z. There are lots of reasons that projects become projects, and we'll talk about that. But it shouldn't be just normal course of business. Those aren't projects, they're programs. Okay, so when you're thinking about projects, you want to think about beginnings and ends, and you want to think about uniqueness. So why do projects come to be? Most of them are up here. Most projects come to be for one of these 4 reasons. Somebody's interested in something. It's usually a stakeholder. Could be the person who holds the purse strings to the money. The government wants to study something. Somebody's interested in something, and they say, let's put some resources toward a project. Okay, and it starts. Somebody might say, I have an idea. I think if we put computers in classrooms, we might see an education revolution. Let's try it out, right? And a project is born. Somebody might say, you know, in the future, I don't think we're going to have paper records in healthcare facilities. I think it's going to be electronic. And 20 years ago, people were talking about the EMR, the electronic medical record, before it ever became anything real, right? So somebody thinks, in the future we will. Those are projects just waiting to happen. And then the last reason that projects happen is because they say, we can't do this alone. We need to work collaboratively and cooperatively, whether it's across governments, ministries of health, NGOs, community-based organizations, whatever it is. Somebody says, we can't do this alone. We need your help and your help and your help, and we've got to start working together. That signals that a project is probably coming. And no matter what project you work on, there are some phases. Now, they're linear up here with the exception of that bottom piece. Okay, bless you. And while I say to you, project management isn't always linear, it kind of is, because if you start too far down, you can get into trouble and have to come up. And the reason I say that is, you see initiating at the front here, right? This is, I think I have an idea, and I'd like to test out all the ways that we could address this issue and make it a project. That's initiation. If you don't do that, and you jump right into planning, we're going with this idea, you've potentially locked yourself out of some great thinking that can bite you later on, because I bet you'll get down to executing and somebody will say, you know, you never really thought about this, right? and it'll put your project in a tailspin. So initiating really does have to be the first step. And then initiating leads to planning. Most organizations do not like you to spend much time in planning because they don't make any money from it, and they don't see any results from it. Okay, that's a lot of time spent planning. This is where you're having meetings talking about how are we going to do this? What are the logistics? Who needs to be involved? Where's the funding coming from? What does success look like? Who are the resources? Do they have the right skill set? Okay, all those things go into planning. You can imagine if you don't do planning, what happens to your project? Anybody? Yeah. Potentially. Right? If you don't take the time to plan, you can guarantee that you won't be as effective as you could have been. I can probably guarantee you that more than 50% of your projects will fail. And there's a real business case for doing planning. So you have to get more savvy at it, right, is the truth. So you initiate, then you plan, then you execute. That's the fun part. We get to do something. Execution means the project is happening. The work is happening. And while you're executing, you're watching out for things. You're watching out for risk. You're watching out for, the money that we were supposed to get for this project just got diverted to another project, and now I can't pay 3 of my resources that are key to this project. Okay, you're watching out for things like the newspaper just wrote a story about the dangers of the chemical that's being used to make the crops healthier, and now people don't want to use this new, quote, environmentally safe product. Right? Those are all risks. And you're watching out for all those risks and hopefully trying to do something about them. That's control. And then at the end of your project, hopefully you'll take the time to say, let's get everybody together. Can be virtually. Can be over the phone, can be in person, can be a combination of those. But let's get folks that worked on this project together, and let's talk about what went well. Let's talk about what didn't go so well and why. Let's talk about what best practices we might be able to glean from this project to take to the next one. Let's talk about what happens to this project. Is it over? Like done and finished, all done? Some are. Some get transferred to somebody else. Some get folded into the normal business operations. It becomes somebody's job, right? And some, it was the first phase of a project. So now we move from phase 1 to phase 2. Okay? Any questions just about the steps? I know I'm blowing through that fast. I want to get you to the good stuff. Yeah? You can't see the bottom. So the bottom says, which part? Can you see executing? Okay, so below executing is controlling, and below controlling is 2 boxes. One says more planning, and one says closing. Yep. Anybody else? Good? Okay. All right, so let's start with initiating. 3 questions that you really want to tackle when you're at that initiating phase. Yes? The slide, previous slide. Where does evaluation kick in there? So evaluation kicks in here during the closing. Okay, you're evaluating your project when you're closing the project out. That's where you're asking the questions. You're saying, did we meet the success criteria that our funder had for us, that we had for us? We're measuring along the way. So measuring is actually part of execution and control. You'd be doing your measurement, and then you evaluate that as you close out the project. Okay? Good question. I'm going to come back because I can't hear you, and I want to hear your question. Now tell me.
Yeah, I got the evaluation aspect, but in terms of monitoring, sometimes, you need to, you learn something, so you, again, replan. So I kind of want to understand how that feedback,
Where's the feedback loop?
yes, what's working to the project, and again, you adjust some stuff.
Okay, so in the closing, you're going to learn a whole lot of stuff. right? You're going to learn things. You're going to learn what you did well. You're going to learn what you didn't learn so well. And the question is, where's the feedback loop and how does that feed in, right? Okay, so if you were to take a dotted line, right, you could make a dotted line from this closing up to any of these. Because sometimes what you learn needs to inform how you select a project. And so it might go there. Sometimes the feedback loop might go to the planning piece because you learned something about how to plan more effectively or who to involve. Sometimes it might go into how you did something, what process you used or what steps, right? And sometimes it might be we didn't anticipate risk and we need to do that better. So you could actually have feedback loops into all of those. Does that answer? Okay. Anything else? Yes. Feasibility. Where does feasibility come in? So feasibility, you know, that's a good question. It's not a cut and dry answer. So sometimes feasibility is up here. And we're going to get to this in just a minute with something called the impact effort grid. I have a great idea, but I don't have the money to do it. Or I have a great idea, but I don't have the scope available to me. So sometimes it mostly will come in between planning and execution. Right? Because once you've selected something, you have to make sure you can actually deliver on it. Okay, so feasibility would be part of your planning that would inform execution. It also might be part of your closing because you might learn that you picked something that you made the scope too big, right? Or you could have broadened it and you didn't. So you might actually find something about feasibility out in closing that would inform the project along the way. Make sense? Going once, going twice? Okay. So let's talk about initiating. Do we know the need? Notice how the word we is there. It's not do you know the need. It's not does the executive director of your agency know the need. It's not does your key stakeholder know the need. It's we, which means you ought to be casting the net wide, right? It kind of answers what is the need. If there's no need, you just have a great idea, but nobody needs it, is it going to get funded? In this day and age? It's a public health project? Probably not. Okay, if you have a cool IT project and you're working for a huge conglomerate, there's a whole research and development group, right, for people who have cool ideas, and we don't know if people have the need yet. That's the whole reason research and development exists. Public health hasn't graduated to that landscape yet, that we have researchers and developers out there just saying, hey, wouldn't it be cool if? I mean, I guess you have a few of them, right? So we have to know what the need is. The second thing is it worth the effort? So just because we have an idea and we know there's a need out there, it may require such an effort that we can't undertake it at this point in time or at all. We need to understand that. Okay, so these are two of the key questions. If the answer is yes, we know the need, and we do understand what the effort is, we need to come to the next question, which is about capability and capacity. Two different things. Capability is, do the folks who will be doing the tasks involved have the skills to do the work? That's different from, do they have the bandwidth to take this work on? Okay, you yourself might be this person. It's the person who always gets put on every project because you're smart, you communicate well, you always deliver no matter what, you say yes to everything, you burn the candle at both ends to get the work done. Everybody loves having you on their projects. Do I have any of those in the room? Probably every single one of you. Probably, honestly. Right? Here's the problem. You're overtaxed. Okay, and as you go on in your career, you'll learn you can't be on every project. You just can't. Right? People have bandwidth, and at some point that bandwidth gets maxed out, and it will begin to affect your ability to be effective on all of the projects you're put on. It may not yet, but it will. So we absolutely have to ask both questions, capacity and capability. Okay? Now what do you do with this? Just because you ask these questions, that doesn't mean that you have anything. Let's skip this one. Here's what you do with it. So this tool is called an impact effort grid. It's nothing more than 9 boxes. They can be squares, they can be rectangles. They happen to be rectangles on here, just the way I did it. Doesn't matter. It's 9 boxes. I shaded them just for the purposes of making a point, but you don't need to shade them. You just have 9 boxes. On the vertical axis, you have the word impact. What impact does your idea potentially have? Okay, now you see the words high, medium, and low. That's meaningless unless you can agree with the project team how you want to define that. Okay, because impact could be to reduce disease levels. Impact could also be to increase the number of visits to a primary care setting. Okay, so it depends on what your project is. So you've got to decide and agree amongst yourself how you will define impact as a first step, and then what is high, what is medium, and what is low. This could be a metric, it could be a dollar amount, it could be number of people, it could be a period of time, but you have to decide so that you're evaluating in a similar way all of your ideas. Who likes sticky notes? Who's somebody that likes sticky notes? Beautiful. This is a great sticky note exercise. You have everybody write all their ideas on a sticky note. 1 idea per sticky note. And then you build this grid, and you can build it big. And you have people put their sticky notes where they think it belongs, and then you start the discussion. Okay, it's a really low-tech way to do it. So you have impact. On the horizontal grid, you have effort. Now, effort could be amount of money that it will take to execute your idea. It could also mean the amount of people power you need. It could be both. Okay, but somehow you've got to define what's the effort. And again, little, moderate, and great. You could have low, medium, and high. Okay, you can change the words. This is not set in stone. It's just a way of evaluating ideas so that you don't get caught up in a great idea because it doesn't cost a lot of money, but it has little impact. You don't want to spend your time on that project, right? You really don't want to be doing many of these in the bottom left-hand corner. They require a little effort, but they don't give you any bang for your buck, so to speak. You don't get a lot of impact. Where do you want to be spending your time? In these shaded areas. So the very top left, the top middle, and the middle one over on the left-hand side. Because for just a little amount of effort, you get medium to high impact. Those are good, right? In fact, you want to be doing as many of this top box as you can. Little effort, high impact. Yes? Okay, and then in the middle, moderate effort, high impact. So you're spending a little more, you might use a little more people power, but you're getting a lot for it. Okay? Can you see yourself doing this exercise? Running this exercise? You're going to do this exercise. I'm going to give you a chance. And your tables. We'll just use your tables. Or you can split your table in half if you think it's too big. I want you to think of the topic of infant mortality. There's a small topic, right? I'm making it intentionally broad. I'm not giving you any more information because this is what happens. People sit around a room and they say, you know, we really should be addressing infant mortality. Hey, Karen, go do a project about that. Come up with a project plan. That's how it happens. So you've got to be thinking, what are all the ways that you could approach reducing infant mortality? And I want you to think about some of your ideas and where they would fall. I'm going to put the grid back up. Where would they fall in terms of the effort and the impact? Okay? Questions about what you're about to do? Okay, you have 5 minutes. We're going to come back together. If I had a glass, I would ting it right about now. All right. So some of you took sticky notes out right away. As I was coming around watching, some of you took sticky notes out right away, started writing your ideas and putting them. Others took blank pieces of paper and made the grid. Some of you used the PowerPoint slide and tried to fit them in. Some just started talking right away. I don't know if you guys have done much on communication yet. If any of you have ever done your Myers-Briggs, so you know what your 4 letters are. But there are different ways that people like to approach these kinds of exercises, and I watch the dynamic happen at many of the tables. Some people like to sit and think about it first and then give their ideas. Other people just start talking. It annoys the people who like to think a little bit because they're still trying to think while somebody's talking. You're going to find this. Right? So a lot of project management is not nuts and bolts of what stage are we in. It's managing the communication. We're going to do an exercise at the very end of this session to highlight communication and the importance of listening and assessing the people you're working with and making sure that, remember I said what and how? So this exercise was both a what. You were trying to come up with ideas and put them in a grid. And how? How did you manage? What was the process that you used to work together to get that done? And both are equally important. So I want to hear just a couple of your ideas, and I'm going to give you the mic. So if you haven't been able to use the mic yet, this is your turn. I see a hand already. One idea, and where does it fall?
Okay, immunization.
Okay.
My name is Lillian, if you haven't known me yet. Immunization, we decided that where is the grid?
There we go.
The effort is moderate and the impact is high.
Right here.
Yes.
Immunization, what do you think? Effort moderate, impact high. Raise your hand. Do you think they're around the right place? I hear one no. Where would you put it? Here? Okay. Oh, we got an answer here. Where's the mic? Thank you very much. Thank you. I heard it depends.
I think it depends on the population you're trying to reach. Immunization programs in the past, historically, have gone for like large areas or like large populations, and in that situation, it would be like low impact. I mean, low effort, high impact. But you know, historically as well, there are those who have been marginalized, those who live very far away, and the resources that you need to put into like reaching those people or like taking everything to their location would make it, I think, moderate effort.
So conceptually, most of you were on the same page with immunizations, conceptually. And then the nuances of it would make it different depending on where you are, who you're trying to immunize, what the success has been with immunization programs with that population in the past, all of those kinds of things. Fair? Okay. You have one? Question.
Yeah, within our group, we were discussing the difference in assessing effort versus impact and how effort is, it seemed more objective. You can really kind of block things ahead of time.
Yep.
The hard material, but impact, when you're rejecting, it seems more difficult. It seemed almost that we could put it on the effort and then tweak the idea and move it up and down. But it was difficult to decide.
So great question and a great point. It's a little easier out of the gate to describe what effort looks like. Right? We're used to that. It's about data. What kind of data are we looking to collect? Impact is a little harder to see, touch, and feel. So it takes a little longer to try and get at that. And when we talk about stakeholders in a little bit, they will help define impact for you, because it's going to be who wants something out of this project, and they will help you define impact and get it a little tighter. It's a great point. Yep. You have one? Here. Pass the mic to the man.
So our group, we decided on nutrition.
Where? Where's it falling?
And we think that's high impact. Well, depending on the situation, it's, but our situation.
See, now everybody will say it depends, right? After you do one.
For our situation, we are thinking it's high impact and great effort.
Here?
Yeah.
Right here?
Yes.
Okay, and so the question is, well, my gosh, if it's going to take that level of effort, but it's going to have a high impact, do we do that project? Do we do it? You have to balance those, okay? It's not that you don't do them, but you don't do all of them. Okay, if you have 7 projects going out of your organization and all 7 of them are here, you better get yourself more money or more people in a hurry. Okay, because while you have high impact, look at the effort that it's going to take. Yeah?
Especially looking at like projects that we want to like maybe push forward, like, you know, how the government, the Ministry of Health is working on a particular issue. And you have these kind of big dreamer ideas. How can you kind of still make sure
How do you scale a big idea? Yep.
that without ending up at
You phase them is mostly what happens, right? So you have a big idea, you know it's going to take a ton of money and a ton of people to do it, and it's the right thing to do, and you're dreaming big, right? You can do a couple of these if you present them well, because people will fund these. They will fund them. You just can't do all of them. So maybe what you do is you scale them. You know, you say, we're going to do it in this geographic region, and then based on the results, we're going to take it bigger. Okay? And then bigger, and then bigger. And so you can get to your end point, which is we want to cure hunger, right? But you have to start here. Does that make sense? Okay, we'll take a few more questions, and then we're going to keep moving.
Our group decided on another intervention. We decided to do cheap mobile incubators.
Okay.
We found that the price would be fairly low, and that for terms of impact, that it would effectively be cost mortality.
So somewhere in this neighborhood?
Yeah, little effort.
Okay, mobile incubators. Okay, absolutely. All of your ideas don't have to be these enormous ones, right? Sometimes they can be around a piece of equipment or a different process, those kinds of things that are already in place. Yep? One more. You were in my range of vision.
Related to the scope issue, we picked a county level subsidized antenatal care program.
Okay.
That could then be used to like scale up.
Okay. All right, so you're going to subsidize a program that's in existence already? Perfect. So where does it fall? Somewhere in here. Perfect. Okay. Did you have a question or you wanted another one? Okay. Okay. Campaigns generally fall here. Any kind of campaign, right? It's a moderate amount of effort, depending on where you are. And generally, you get a moderate, in terms of impact. They typically go along with something else. When you do a campaign, it's typically not the only project that's going on to address an issue. Okay? All right. I would love to do as many as you have, and then I'm not going to get to the rest of it. So if it's a question, I'll take it, but the ideas we're going to just keep. Question? One more idea? Can you save it and you're going to use it in the next, I'll get to you. You're going to use it in the next exercise. Otherwise, I'm not going to teach you what I need to teach you, and then I will have failed. And we can't have that happen. All right, we're going to talk about a project plan. So we talked about initiating, right? Initiating impact effort grid. You ask those questions. Well, then you pick something. Now here's where most organizations fall short. They pick an idea, and what do you think they do next? They want to get started. What do you mean we have to plan? We know what we want to do. Let's just go do it. But look at all the things you have to talk about. You have to talk about scope, right? And scope tells me, I'll get to it in a later slide, but we're going to talk about 2 things with scope. What we're going to do and why it's so important to do it right now. That's called your justification, right? So you have your description and your justification. What are we going to do with this project, and why should anybody care about doing it right now? Okay, in a lot of the towns across Massachusetts, you've been here for a couple of weeks, some of you longer, right? Mosquito spraying is getting an awful lot of attention. We have an enormous infestation of mosquitoes across the Commonwealth. And there used to be a program that towns and cities could pay for, they could pay into, to spray for mosquitoes. Many towns decided not to do it this year because they said, well, nobody ever really got sick in our town, and it costs a lot of money, and bless you, we don't really feel like we got a whole lot for it. So we're not going to spray this year. And guess what's happening in those cities and towns? Yeah, people are getting bit, and everybody's scared, and now they want to come into the project again, right? And so you have a lot of companies that are doing projects right now capitalizing on that fear of saying, boy, if we got a project for you, we've got a way to help you that you haven't thought of before, and the justification is, this is a big deal right now, right? We have an infestation that could hurt you with Triple E and West Nile virus and some of the others. So scope is important. So what are you going to get from this project at the end of the day? That's what a deliverable is. This is project management lingo, so I want you to hear it in the lingo and the jargon that you may hear it in the organizations that you'll be working in, so that when you hear the terms, you know what they are, but I want you to know what they are so you don't get lost in the terms. So people walk around talking about deliverables all day long. Deliverables are simply tasks, okay? And they're tasks that produce something you can see, touch, and feel. So a training manual is a deliverable. Okay, a brochure is a deliverable. A piece of equipment is a deliverable. A training plan or a marketing plan is a deliverable. And each one of those tasks gets set out to say they're all part of this project. Your project plan, which I know you have in your handouts, is a deliverable. All of those things are deliverables. Then you have to figure out who's going to work on this project. So in this case, resources don't mean money, they answer people. Now, not only do you have to know who, you have to know what percentage of their time. So I might get a third of you, and I might get 20% of you, and I might get a day a month from you, and I might get 6 hours on the project spread over the course of 6 months from you. Okay, and you've got to manage that. That can be challenging. So you need to know up front, which resources do I have on this project, over what period of time, and how much of them do I get? And you're having a session on negotiation tomorrow, right? You're going to talk about this. Keep this in your head and ask that question tomorrow if your presenter doesn't talk about it. How do I negotiate for resources when I feel like I need more of them than I've been given? How do I negotiate for that? So that's important. Budget. It's money. It's not just how much, it's who's it coming from. Because sometimes there are strings attached, and you want to know that right up front. Okay, particularly if it's grant funding. And that's corporate as well as nonprofit, as well as government. Okay, each kind of funding stream comes with something that you need to do. Sometimes your budget's tied to resources. We'll give you this money. In return, we want to make sure that you have somebody from blah, blah, blah agency working on this project with you. So you've got to make sure you accommodate for that. Okay? You've got to know that. Success criteria. You asked about evaluation before. This is where you talk about up front, before you start anything, what does success look like for this project? Okay, don't tell me things like, well, people will be healthier because of this project. What is that? Because I bet if I asked you what healthier, and you what healthier, and you what healthier looks like, you all have different answers, right? So this is where you have to get specific, and you have in your handouts a one-pager about being SMART, S-M-A-R-T. If you have never written a SMART goal before, you will at some point in your career, whether it's performance evaluation time or otherwise. But it's a way of drilling down into your metrics so that you're saying specifically, we want 60% of the children under age 5 to have at least one healthy meal a day that consists of X number of fruits, X number of vegetables, X number of dairy, and so on. Okay, that's a specific statement versus we'd like kids to be healthier. See the difference? All right, so for your projects, you want to make sure that you have success criteria. Can you have qualitative success criteria, or does it always have to be quantitative? It can be qualitative. They can't all be qualitative. Okay, they can't all be. But you can have some, right? There's something about morale, right? The feeling of a community going up, okay? Hope increasing. Those kinds of things. It's tough to measure hope, right? But you know it when you see it, don't you? You know it when you feel it. Absolutely. Yep. So say more.
Like for example, if part of a project is to achieve measurable quantitative outcomes with the ministry of health, a first step towards that would be those capital relationships.
Yep. So you'd have to say what comes from that relationship. So building the relationship is step one of a metric, but to service what? So it could be building a collaborative relationship to get to such and such point by this date. That would be a metric. Yep.
What's the difference between deliverables and success criteria?
The difference between deliverables and success criteria. A deliverable is simply a set of tasks. Okay? It means you're going to collect the data, and you're going to build the house, and you're going to get the materials, and you're going to keep everybody fed, and you're going to make sure nobody passes out from heat stroke, and right? So you're assigning tasks. Those are deliverables. The success criteria is, at the end of the project, we have a house that is sustainable, that is not on the electric grid, that a family can move into right away. That would be a success criteria. See the difference? Success criteria versus impact, or you see it as impact. So it is to some extent, because if we have the right impact, the success criteria leads us there. So that's exactly right. Exactly right. Yes?
When you're planning, is this list like in the order that you consider things to be planned, or is it not you're considering first?
Yeah, so is this linear, is the question. And the answer is no. Okay, it's simply a bulleted list for the purposes of a slide. It kind of makes sense. Scope has to come first, I will say. You definitely want scope to come first. But after that, these can go in whatever order you need the conversation to go. And it might be multiple conversations, or you might get some of the answers from one group and some from another group. But you want to make sure that at the end of the day, before you start execution, you've got all of this. Yep.
Do you have any extra handouts?
I believe there are some extra handouts, and they'll get them to you. All right. All right. So risk we talked about, those are the what ifs, right? You want to have the what if conversation before you start the project. Yep.
I just had a question about that. I worked in corporate for a number of years on and off yourself.
Yes.
One of the biggest problems with reliable is risk assessment. Think so if you were a project and you were so far along in the timeline and all these things would come up that were supposed to have pursued.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering from your perspective, any advice for how to better
Yes, so the question was, she worked in corporate America for a time and has gone back and forth, and they didn't do this. So is there a, yeah, not very well. Most people are afraid to talk about risk. Who wants to talk about the boat being sunk? Right? Who wants to talk about things going wrong? I work with a law firm really closely, and they can't stand talking about risk, yet that's what they manage all the time. But if you use the word risk in their organization, it's like, whoa, we don't talk about that here. You have to talk about risk. So what other word could you use? You could use a word like, what if, let's look at each stage of our project, right? And what's our contingency plan? Most businesses are great about using the word contingency plan. They like that. What's our plan B? Okay, if something should happen, do we have a plan B? What's our backup strategy? So if it's the language that's the problem, change the language. Don't get hung up on the word risk if somebody doesn't like it, right? To some extent, you've got to influence the process. People won't start off by talking about risk. You know what they'll say to you? Oh, don't worry about that. Right? That's never happened before. Don't worry about that, right? Or here's my favorite one. We've got that covered. Yeah. So you know what I say to them? How do you have it covered? If it's never happened before, right? How do you have it covered? Like, what's your plan? I'm dying to know. You got to force it a little bit. You've got to be the devil's advocate. You've got to be the thorn in the side. In a respectful way, you have to say, I'm concerned that we haven't fully thought out our plan B. And while I realize we don't want to spend a lot of time on this because we're all hopeful it may not happen, the reality is it does happen. And if you can point to another organization, business, or similar project that sunk because they didn't look at risk, it will help you, right? Find an example that the people you're talking to will pay attention to and give it to them. You know, they thought it wouldn't happen either. The banking industry never thought that they'd have the problems that they had. The financial industry never thought they'd have the problems that they had. The government never thought they would have the problems that it had. You know, you've got to bring the examples to them. Does that help? Okay. All right. So risk. Stakeholders. Stakeholders are people who will benefit from your project. They could be recipients. They could be funders. They could be executives or leaders in different government, non-government agencies, ministries of health, other government bodies, public health agencies, regulators. They could be parents. They could be children. They could be educators. Right? They could be anybody. It's who has a stake in your project and whose support is critical to your project happening. Okay, so it's who can help you get to where you want to go and who can be a block. So you think about it from both perspectives. And then this, you know, what are the assumptions going in? Well, I assume that the person who gets the money gets the money. Right? I can't walk into a project always worrying, is the money there? I assume that if you give me the resources, I'm going to have the resources. Those are the kinds of assumptions that you make. This shouldn't take too long. We'll talk about the implementation timeline or the schedule. About 60% of the time I walk into an organization and I say, show me your project plan. And they show me this Excel spreadsheet that's like this long, and it has all the tasks listed and all this data connected to it. It's color-coded, it's got all these tabs. It's an implementation timeline. It tells me what's going to happen. They haven't done any of this. And they say, we're stuck, and we don't know why. And I laugh. Right? No, I don't. I show them why. That's why I'm there, to help them. I show them why, because they haven't done this. They jumped right into execution without doing planning. And that's why they're stuck. And then once you've done implementation, which we will talk about later, we talk about post-implementation. It's not over when it's over. What has to happen? Sometimes things get transferred, as I said, to a training group, or to another group, or to another organization. Right? So you want to talk about what happens when the project is done. All right, I said we were going to talk about scope. So scope is, again, the justification, right? Why are we doing this project and why now? For example, does it support a particular policy issue? Is there an unmet need? Right? Is somebody saying we should be doing this? And then the description is what the project is. Now, sometimes you see in scope statements what the project isn't. And that's okay, as long as you also say what it is. Here's an example. You see a lot of cardiac type programs, improving heart health, okay? And you can improve heart health, as many of you know, lots of different ways. So I could say that my project is going to be to reduce the blood pressure of a group of folks whose hearts aren't healthy. Okay, and the way we're going to do this is through medication. Okay? What I'm not doing is I'm not studying the impact of a low-salt diet on their blood pressure. So I'm saying what I am doing and what I'm not doing. Okay, it's a way of managing your variables. So scope can be both about what you're doing as well as what you're not doing, but it needs to talk about the justification and the description. So you ready to practice? Yeah, you're going to put this into play. All right, so here's the deal. You've got 1 year, you have $500,000, and it's to address poverty concerns with homebound elders in a rural community. That's what you know. Okay? The money comes from 3 NGOs working together. So you've got a collaboration of 3 agencies that's coming up with this $500,000. And they have asked you to come to their board of directors meeting with your scope statement, and they're going to award the money to the group that they think has the strongest scope statement. You want that money, don't you? You want to help rural elders that are homebound and poverty, don't you? We're all public health professionals. Who wouldn't like to spend some time with $500,000 impacting people in a positive way? Yeah? All right, so work at your tables. You have 10 minutes, and you've got to come up with a scope statement. I promised you were going to get in on this. You guys have a scope statement? Yeah? You got one that's close? Give it a shot. Give it a shot.
Okay. So our scope statement, we focused on addressing like the what and the why, not the how. And we said that we wanted to address the lack of access to medical care, such as adequate nutrition, to like community and to livelihood options, such as like craft making or baking. And we wanted to do this because the elderly are already such a marginalized population given their rural community that increased their need and their low income status, made them especially vulnerable. So that was our scope.
Okay. All right. Who else has one that they want to read? We'll listen to a couple. I can't get them all in.
Sorry.
But we'll listen to a few. You have one? Here, pass the mic. Here you go.
Thank you. So we wrote a quick vision statement, just saying we are undertaking this project because we believe our elders are worthwhile members of our community who deserve a good quality of life. We believe our elders suffer an unfair burden of poverty.
Second. You guys hear this?
Sorry.
Start again.
Sorry. We wrote out a vision statement that reads, we are undertaking this project because we believe our elders are worthwhile members of our community who deserve a good quality of life. We believe our elders suffer an unfair burden of poverty and that with the help of these NGOs, we can alleviate this burden. And then in our description, we described that we would set out like a home service care organization temporarily, but the first, which should almost be 2 phases. The first phase would be to perform a needs assessment to make sure that the services that we did provide on home care visits would actually meet the needs of the elders in the community, and then using that needs assessment to kind of tailor the services that we would provide specifically to meet the needs of the community.
So there are 40 home care corporations in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that do just that. Right? You gonna read yours? Good. Okay, we got another one. I'm coming this way. Good.
Our project is premised on the fact that the social support system has broken down. There's increased breakdown of the social support system. Most of these elders are left alone at their homes. They just need food. They need to be taken care of. They just need better housing. Maybe we can just get them and put them like in a destitute home where they are given food, they are taken care of, they are bathed, they are treated well in a home kind of environment. Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
Did you ask for a statement or something else? I don't know. People are giving very many words.
It's mixed. It's mixed right now. So
Okay.
it's whatever you have, and then we'll talk about it. I'm intentionally not giving any feedback. I just want to hear them all.
Okay.
You have one?
Not now.
All right. I gave the wrong answer. All right.
So our justification was based on that the elders had given back to their community and deserved something. They don't necessarily have the means to support themselves, so we wanted to do something for them and help empower them. And our project was based on helping them write their stories and working with volunteers to record those stories and then have partners and sell them and basically, yeah.
Nice. Okay. Good. All right. I have 2 more. One here and one in the back.
So we focused specifically on the fact that it said you're being offered this money to address poverty concerns within that community.
Yep.
So we, much more for our justification, went into not the reasons that they're homebound or anything like that, but the reasons that they are impoverished, such as they can't get to work, much more just the poverty in general, and then didn't necessarily come up with a perfect program yet. But as far as the justification, that's really where we focus.
Okay, and I only gave you 10 minutes. These take a lot longer than 10 minutes. All right. Last but certainly not least.
So, our mission is to reduce the level of poverty among elders in XY Village. If we win this grant, our plan, which incorporates infrastructure improvements, education on personal well-being, and incentives to seek adequate health care, will increase the mental and psychological care in the village by 30%, improve the amenities, including water, electricity, food, and shelter available to these elders, and also improve access to adequate care for old age ailments by 35%.
Nice. All right. So what do you think the funding agency is going to respond to in any of the presentations that you've heard? Yes. What are they going to respond? You want the mic? You got it. You're on.
Well, if I was a funding organization, I would ask a certain group which talked of writing stories. We are talking about a poverty situation, a situation of, total deprivation of social services. I have no food, I have no shelter, I have no clothes. How do you tell me to begin writing stories? I want food, I want to sleep well,
You were going to sell them, right? You were selling those stories. Yeah, so this is their marketing, what I heard is a marketing plan, right? You're going to sell the stories and use the money to help? Yes?
Yeah, so it's not that it would be a rollout phase. It's not that initially we would just be like, give them paper and just be like, work for nothing. Our idea would be people would get an upfront cost. Like there are organizations now where people get an upfront cost for producing something, and then they would get a profit, like a marginal profit for every book that is sold. And our services would initially start with storytelling, and obviously it's something that the elders would want to do. We are not going to force it on them. And it's a way, and as elders go, everyone has advice to share when they're older, and when they're homebound, they don't get anyone to talk to very much. And I think that creates a community where their stories are shared. So it goes just beyond getting immediate food. It goes with integrating them back into their community.
So some of it can also be about dealing with depression in the elderly, right? And when you're depressed, you don't want to eat. So there can be sort of a connection around, you were talking about all the different needs that people have. You had socioeconomic, you had transportation needs, you had emotional needs, you had financial needs. They had metrics, right? Did you hear their metrics? They were going to do something by 30% and something by 35%. I also heard over here, I'd love to give you all the mic, and I can't right this second, but I'll get to you. Over here, did you hear like the passionate story? Right? I want to hear, if I'm a funder, I want to hear in your scope, I don't want to hear something that's like this. I want to hear, we care about the elders in society. Right? This is your platform, and you have to use it. When you're making a presentation, you want to grab my heartstrings, you want to grab my business sense, and you want to make it impossible for me to say no to you. So when you're writing a scope statement, your description can be the more boring part, if you will, right? The nuts and bolts of what you're going to do. I want to see some metrics. Now, they can be fuzzy, because you don't necessarily want to be held to them. You can give a spectrum, right, a range. That's fine. But I want you first to grab my attention by somehow telling me the story of an elder, right? You could talk about a particular person and their story, and that might grab me. You could read me or give me a snapshot from an article, a few statistics, but tell me something that makes me care about listening to the rest of your presentation. Hey, now, you may not be in this situation right away because you may be working in an organization that already has the money to do something. However, it's a really good idea to know how to go after something and sell your idea in a way that somebody's going to give you something. Sometimes it's money, sometimes it's equipment, sometimes it's their services. You have to know how to do this, okay? And so this is where those of you that are a little more theatrical, you're in your wheelhouse, right? You are, because you're used to this. Those of you who don't enjoy being in front of people, it'll be harder for you. right? So this is where you want your data to do the work for you. Work in teams, pair up, use a group presentation, and tap into your skill set about what you're best at coming up with for this scope statement. It's critical, okay? All right, we're going to move on from scope because I want to just make a couple of other points for you. One is stakeholders. Stakeholders are anybody who's interested in this project for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's their power, where they sit, their position, their role, okay? And you need to take care of these folks because they can either make or break your projects. And here's another tool that I want to show you. We'll get all this stuff. You don't have this electronically. We'll get it all to you. That's easy enough to do, right? Okay. So another grid, another box, okay? Stakeholder analysis grid. On the vertical axis is our friend impact again, right? Impact, influence on the outcome. How much power does this stakeholder have when you think about your project? How much power do they have to help you or hinder you? Low to high. Now their vested interest. Why do they care? How much do they care? That's vested interest. Do they care a little bit or do they care a lot? How do you find out? You have to ask them. So you've got to talk to your stakeholders. They don't have to be interviews, right? You can have casual conversations. You can divvy up the stakeholders. Who knows this person? Who knows that person? You can tap into it that way. You can do focus groups. There are lots of ways you can find out your stakeholders. But at the end of the day, you've got a couple of categories you have to worry about, okay? The main category of stakeholder that you really need to worry about is that top right. There's somebody who has a very high interest and they have a lot of power. They want to know what's going on and you've got to keep them informed. Okay, then you have the person who has a lot of power but they really don't care. Okay, now they're important because they have a lot of power. So you've got to keep them satisfied by giving them enough. So send out a progress report if you have electronic access. Include them on a distribution list. Invite them to lunch once in a while. Take them with you on a site visit if that's what's involved. Right? You've got to include them because if they start to feel ignored, you have a potential problem. Remember, they have a lot of power. So they may not care at the beginning, but they'll care a whole lot if you ignore them. Then you have the people who don't have a lot of power and they don't really care. But why are they on the grid? Well, they may have a political position. That's why they're on the grid. So you need to monitor them. Okay, again, you need to throw their name around enough, connect with them, send them something, include them enough, let them say no. Invite them to meetings, let them say no. They've still been invited. Okay, make them feel like they're included in a particular way. Because of their title or role, they may not have a lot of power, but they've got some. Okay? And then you have the people you have to keep informed. These are the people that really care about your project and they have no power. A lot of times these are the recipients of your projects. They don't have power, but they care a whole lot about what's going on. So you want to involve them as much as you can. Did you have a question?
I mean, we must keep in mind that there's different kinds of power as well.
Correct?
And I maybe don't add keep informed, but also include it. Because
Yes.
if it's a project that includes specifics from the beginning, it's going to be more sustainable and more real.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great point. I agree with you completely. I agree with you completely. So inclusive as well as informed. Yep, I would think that's right. So I just want to ask you, we're not going to do a big separate out for lack of time, but let me ask you, remember that 1 year, $500,000 project you just did? Who knows of a stakeholder? Who's a stakeholder on that project? The elderly. Yeah. And where do they fit on the grid? Here? Okay. Who else? What's another stakeholder? The funder. Where does the funder fit? Now there were three. Here? They've got the money, and you hope that they care. Here's the truth. Here's the truth. Not all of them are there. Some of them are here. Some of them are here. Okay? So manage that the way you need to. Who else? So your funders and the elderly. Okay, the people who are working on the project. Yep, and where do you guys all fall? Where are you? You're kind of somewhere, you're over here, you all care, hopefully. Hopefully, right? But not all of you have power. Influence can be another way of thinking of power. You could trade this word power for influence. Okay? You could change it to status. You could change it to lots of different things. Make it work for you. It's a tool for you to use so that when you're thinking about your projects, you don't miss key stakeholders. That's why this grid is important. Don't get hung up on the words. Change the words as you need to so that you cast the net wide and you include all of your stakeholders. Okay? All right, and then let's finish up with the work plan. So, what is a work plan? It can be as simple as a list of tasks, but here are the categories that are really important. So when you get to a work plan, you want to keep in mind what's the work. Whether you use the word task, deliverable, item, I don't care what you use, they don't have to necessarily be in order, though it's helpful, right? It is helpful to list them, do this, then this, then this, then this, then this. That is helpful. Those go here, the work. You have to have an owner for that work. It doesn't mean that that's the person doing the work. It means they are accountable for making sure that that task or deliverable gets done. If you're a project manager, you may see your name a lot more than some of the other people on the project. If you're a subject matter expert, you're on this project because you know how to get funding from ABC Corporation better than anybody else that's ever worked with ABC Corporation, right? You might have that task of getting the funding, securing the funding, right? And that may involve putting the presentation together, getting the scope, making the presentation, getting the funding, passing the funding on to the project manager. There may be a whole list of tasks, and that may have that subject matter expert next to it, and so on. Status. It's really helpful to know, bless you, what the status of these tasks are. I like using red, yellow, and green. If you're colorblind, you may not be able to use red, yellow, and green. And I say that not to joke, okay, but it's a real issue. So use the right status for the right people working on the project. I like to use red, yellow, and green, where red means I'm way off target, yellow is I'm shaky, and green is I'm right on target. Okay, you can use whatever you want, but you've got to have some kind of a way of saying we're okay with this task or we're not okay with this task. And then what's your expected completion date? When do you expect to get that task done? And you see there's always a section for comments, right? Hard to get a hold of so-and-so, right? Having trouble moving this one through. Last 3 project meetings were canceled. Some way of communicating to the person, this is a live document, right? Everybody on the project should have access to it. It's what you can use to inform your stakeholders. People should be able to look at it and see what the project looks like from a data standpoint at any time. So use your comments to help people understand what's going on in these different columns. Okay, this can be high-tech, this can be low-tech, depending on what you've got going on. I want to make one comment on special challenges and then we'll wrap up. Some of you are going to be working in environments that have little to no technology. Don't let that stop you. Much of project management is a way of getting the work done. It doesn't depend on spreadsheets or tools or big fancy computer programs. It depends a whole lot on the questions that you ask, the assessment that you do, and how you organize the work. Okay? If you have technology, great. That only adds to it. Okay? The culture. Not everybody likes this idea of project planning. You know, people think it takes a lot of time. We don't have the time. I don't have the resources to give you. Okay? You will face that. You need to show folks the value of doing project management. So you may not be able to do the whole soup to nuts in every project. Maybe you decide to pick scope for one project, and you're going to knock it out of the park for them around scope so that you show them that without a great scope, you don't have a great project. And then you build on that. And then you build on that and you build on that. Okay, and that's how you will influence the culture of project management, is by offering it a taste at a time, being successful with it, and then building on that. Okay? So the people. People are quirky. We come in different shapes and sizes. Not everybody gets along. You have conflict. Everybody thinks their way is right. Everybody thinks their idea is the best. You know, you have resistance, you have infighting. It doesn't always happen at the beginning. Everybody smiles right at the beginning. Oh, it's so nice to meet you and great to work with you. And then, 3 months later, oh, can you believe what so-and-so did? Right? So you have to deal with some of that. And you use your communication skills that you hopefully already have and are continuing to work on. My biggest advice to you here is don't let problems continue unaddressed. Surface them as early as possible, get them out onto the open, and deal with them, address them. Okay? It will help you enormously. And then scope creep. People are going to say to you, oh, you guys are doing a great job with that project. While you're working on that, can we add to it? Here's what you say to them. No! No! Right? The integrity of the data is affected. The project was not scoped for that. Here's what you can say. Phase 1 is about doing this work. I love your idea, if you do. Right? Let's build it into phase 2. Right? And in our project planning meetings, we will incorporate that conversation so that in phase 2, we can address your need. 9 times out of 10, people will be okay with that. All right? I want everybody to take a piece of paper, and then we're done. Just any piece of paper you want. And hold it up in the air when you have it. Just like hold it up. So I know everybody has it. Just a piece of paper. All right. I'm going to teach you the basics of communication in 30 seconds. It has to be like a piece of this paper. It can't be a sticky note. No, it's got to be a piece of paper. Okay, now close your eyes. And I mean close your eyes. I don't mean like one eye and look at me through the other one. Close your eyes. I'm going to give you a set of directions. You're going to follow them. And all of our paper is going to do exactly what we needed to do at the end. Are you ready? All right, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to fold your paper in half. Don't open your eyes. Fold your paper in half. Now I want you to tear off the right-hand corner, top right-hand corner. Tear it off. If you tear a handout, we'll get you another one. Don't worry, I won't be offended. Right-hand corner, tear it off. Top right-hand corner. Now I want you to fold it in half again. Now I want you to tear off the lower right-hand corner. Okay? Now I want you to open your paper up, unfold it, and your paper ought to look like my paper. How many papers look like my paper? Uh-oh. Hey, what happened? Some of you have holes in the middle of your paper. All right, what you just listened to, guys, ladies and gentlemen, what you just listened to was an exercise in communication and how important it is to know the expectations. Right? I never said you couldn't ask me questions, but when I gave you the first instruction, I said fold the paper in half. If you didn't fold it in half like this, you are already sunk. So anybody that did this, you were already sunk. You might as well just open your eyes and put your paper down. All right? So the importance of asking questions, the importance of communicating, the importance of making sure you know what it needs to look like at the end. Thank you all very much. Enjoy your time. Yes, you're welcome.